Welcome to Rocket Ship, the home of epic React Native content. I'm Simon Grimm, creator of galaxies.dev, and today's guest is Mariusz Stanisz. I tried my best Polish accent to say that, but I think I still got it wrong. But anyway, Mariusz is React Native developer at Software Mention. I met him not directly, but I saw him on stage at the App.js, and now we're finally here, so thanks for taking the time.
Hi everyone. Yeah. Actually, my name is Mariusz Stanisz, but you pronounce it very well. So
I gave my best. I gave my best. You had a presentation about brownfield applications at the last App.js, so last 2024. We're gonna dive into that because immediately when I saw the presentation in Krakow, I knew we had to talk about it. This topic. Just excites me because it seems to be very challenging. You presented it also in that way that you encountered a lot of problems, and I have many questions about it. But before that, I just want to highlight another thing about you. I saw you speak 8 languages. Is that correct?
yeah, I used to be a guide in Krakow in the past, and my passion were languages. That's why I started also, learning them. At the same time, I could use them as travel guides. I cannot say that I speak them fluently at this moment. I mean, all of them very fluently. But if I have, I don't know, maybe a week, I could start speaking again.
So you could have a conversation with people from, I don't know, you had like what are the languages?
Well, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Finnish, Croatian, Czech, and well, of course, Polish and English.
That's interesting. No German. I thought some of you also learned it
Well,
in
I,
school.
I, I tried. I mean, I don't know, but it was difficult for me to learn in general Germanic languages because I tried Danish, I tried Swedish, of course, German. I had problems with remembering words, and
Yeah,
Spanish
it's
is easier to learn Italian. So, and because I'm
absolutely.
Polish, I could learn easier, for example, Croatian.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I heard learning German is a real challenge. I had a friend from Spain a while ago, and he said there are like no rules. Some words are just like they change. They're just different sometimes. And when I think about it, sometimes I'm also like, yeah, there's really no rule. You just have to know all that stuff, and that makes the language kind of horrible, actually.
Yeah, especially with the genders in German.
Yes, but that's it's not a problem if you say daddy does wrong. Anyway, you also visited 1,020 Polish cities. Is that as well correct?
Yeah,
Why did that happen, and how did you count them?
well, that's I can say that it was a challenge for me to visit all Polish cities. I really like cities, and because I was a travel guide in the
Mhm.
past, it just matched. So I started visiting them, and at some point I decided, okay, so I'm going to visit all of them, and it turns out there are 1,020 of them at this moment. Yeah, this year I finished the challenge, so I'm done
Is
already.
there like a hidden gem that everyone should visit? I mean, I found Krakow to be pretty nice, so I went out for like early runs around the city and the river, and it was really beautiful. So, did I
Well,
already see the best of the best?
I have to say that we have beautiful cities in Poland, including, of course, Krakow, Warsaw, Gdańsk. These are all big cities. But personally, in my heart, the favorite one is in northern East Poland, that is called Supraśl, which is a very small city. I like to go there, relax there. There is a river, a small lake, and yeah, I've been there already like 5 times. Next year, I'm going to go there again because my friends are getting married there. So that's like a very small city, like 2,500 people live there. But I really like the vibe of that place.
I see. So you also have the retirement plan already built in case you age faster than everyone else because you have to do the brownfield integration
Yeah,
at software
yeah,
mention. Yeah.
it
All
feels
right.
like.
Okay. So let's kick this off with a easy question for you. What is actually brownfield integration? I think when I stumbled upon it in React Native, I think it was the first time I heard about this brownfield and greenfield. So could you just explain the concept in general in React Native?
Yeah, sure. So let's maybe we can focus on the React Native worlds because
Absolutely.
these terms like brownfield and greenfield are used in some other areas, also in software engineering. So in the context of React Native, let's imagine we have a native application, iOS or Android, and then using the code that has already been written, we want to enhance the application and add React Native to it. So we want to use a native app as canvas for our new React Native app. We can, for example, include React Native to add a screen in React Native to test something out, to see if React Native works for the team, if it's a good solution. So there are actually plenty of opportunities there, and I think that we haven't explored all of them yet.
Why do you think is that the case?
Well, first of all, it's not really widely. It's not very easy to use that in the
Hmm.
first place. I mean, when you already know how to do it, it's way easier. But then, if you haven't done it before and you want to integrate React Native, you want to add React Native into your native application. That's when some problems may arise. Just like a couple of days ago, I decided to put myself to a challenge, and I decided to download the code of the Wikipedia app that is open source, and I decided to integrate it with React Native, and I managed to do that. I needed like 3 hours for both iOS and Android. However, I have to emphasize one thing, that in many cases I had to use the code that I had already written. So only by
And you knew
following
the
the
steps. You
tutorial,
did it a couple of times before.
yeah. So it's possible, right? But the problem is that sometimes you just need to know what you're doing, and you need to have the code prepared somewhere. Because just following the tutorial that is on the React Native documentation, well, I suppose that in some cases it would work, but not in all the cases. I have a plan to you know start talking about it and improve it, because of course with every version of React Native it changes,
Mhm.
and it's getting, I don't want to say more difficult, but it's getting different.
Yeah,
So
I have the guide right open called integration with existing apps. It starts for me confusing because there are like four separate ways I can use Android Kotlin, Android Java, iOS Objective C, or iOS Swift. And whatever I select, I can scroll for a very long time on that page until I get to the bottom. And I see a lot of code snippets and I see a lot of pictures and I see Swift code and things in between. So why is it so challenging in the first place? I feel like I think I talked to after your talk, I talked the other day with Gent and some other folks, and I was like, there's this. I come from the Ionic world, and there's something called Ionic portals, which is like you can like throw a portal into your native application and then it can render any kind of React Native or Ionic or web app, and it's actually quite easy. And I was like, why isn't that possible with React Native? Why is this stuff so hard?
well, I believe that the main problem is that, well, it's not really widely used, at least in the. I mean, of course, for example, Microsoft uses it, and some other big companies. But in general, I would say that Brownfield is like maybe 2% of all React Native
Oh,
application, maybe
really?
even less. So if you already know what you're doing, you usually just integrate a new app, and if you've done it, in general, everything should work and you don't have to touch it again. So I believe that the biggest problem is that it's still not really widely used. And
Hmm.
maybe in the future, when we improve the documentation, it should be easier, because basically it's about adding a couple of lines of code into the pod file or Gradle, build that Gradle, and then well, integrate run the application on Android via, for example, React Native Activity, or on iOS using so-called React Root View. So that's basically it.
Why isn't that possible, like with a patch command? I mean, the code doesn't look too hard, and like my cursor application right now is doing so many crazy things and divs at once. I feel like, couldn't this be possible with some sort of command?
I believe it would, but maybe we just have to sit down and think about the best solution, how to solve it. Because in many cases, you have Gradle, for instance. Gradle is a huge tool. It has plenty of files. There is the bit.gradle, b.gradle in the app folder, where there is settings.gradle, Gradle
Hmm.
properties, and so on and so on and so on. And some of those files need some code in there. So uh, you know, probably it would be way easier with some kind of command. I don't think that everything would be possible with just a command, but most of the job could be done there. However, because of the whole migration to new architecture and so on, I think that the priority for brownfield applications
Hmm.
is also a bit lower at this moment. But well, we'll see what the future brings.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to hear from you that it's actually not that popular. I mean, I got the feeling because there are like no tutorials, nobody's really doing this on YouTube, and you don't see like big guides on it. But after all, it's a good idea for companies to test waters. If they have a native app and they want to see how this React Native thing works, it's like the easiest thing. They don't have to like do completely new rebuild. They could just gradually adopt React Native. So I thought it would be used more actually.
I think it would be a great selling point for React Native. Just to if it's if it could be integrated way easier, and for well, the devs could start working with it instantly and without struggling to just start the project. Um, but yeah, well, if you integrate a simple screen and you can do it with not so much effort, let's say. If you just want to have a simple React Native screen, of course you can write some JavaScript code, but then if you want to add some dependencies, then new problems may arise. So well, we have to learn how to solve these problems, because of course React Native dependencies also add some native code somewhere, and there might be some clashes, especially if you'd like to use the same library on your in your native app and then in React Native. That may be problematic. Of course, you can solve everything, but if you'd like to just use some React Native SDK, it may be pretty difficult, because I struggled with integrating, for example, push notification SDKs, because we needed to use it in the native code, and then we had to use React Native SDK in React Native. So I had to dig into the native code of the SDK to understand what's going on there, and had to modify some code so those two packages don't clash. Luckily, in many cases, SDKs already include native code, which can be used in the same way as it
Mm.
is in native apps. So it may be a problem, but it doesn't have to be a problem after all.
Okay, so we already arrived at the problems. Took us only 30 minutes, so that means that there are a couple of problems. Maybe let's take a step back for a moment and from the outside talk about the general big steps of the integration. So if I'm thinking about doing a brownfield integration, what are like the major steps that I have to do in the beginning? Like how does it work in general to bring in my React Native app or code into a native app?
Well, first of all, you need to modify pod file for iOS and build Gradle for Android. There are a couple of things that you'll have to add. Nothing, not too much, but still some code.
Mostly
One of them,
dependencies or
also, yes, also some dependencies like React Native, Hermes, I believe. So those things, at least for Android, for iOS, there are a couple of scripts. I don't remember exactly, because basically you can just copy paste the template of pod file and then just adapt it to your existing pod file. Of course, there are some projects that don't have CocoaPods because there are a couple of different tools to that manage dependencies in the iOS world. Uh, for example, Wikipedia on iOS doesn't use CocoaPods, but it turned out not to be a problem because I just copied the template of the pod file for a just a simple, uh, just the basic template of React Native, and I just added it to the project and it worked. So that's a good thing. I mean, I had to change a bit the code to match the name of the project, but it wasn't too much. So that's the first step: the pod file and the build Gradle scripts. And the second thing is to find a place to run your React Native application. So then you can just choose the place where you want to open it, and I recommend to test first if everything works. So do not build a whole new flow just to open React Native. Just take a simple button and try to run it there. Because on iOS it's very simple. You just the code for iOS is pretty straightforward, and there are maybe, I don't know, 30 lines of code, something like that. And apart from that, you should also create some space on your Android app to do that. Then you can do it via so-called Android activity or an Android fragment. But luckily, it's not so difficult either, I believe, just to add this basic native code to run React Native. Apart from that, you need to create a React Native project. So you can run a React Native project with the init command. As far as I know, at this moment, Expo doesn't really work perfectly with Brownfield's apps. So I would recommend using bare React Native. But well, at this moment, maybe in the future it's
Hmm.
going to be changed. But even on the Expo documentation, there is, well, there is a small article about Brownfield, and it says that some of the packages work, some of them don't. Like React Router, Expo Router apparently doesn't support Brownfield yet.
Hmm.
So I would recommend using bare React Native, and then you just swap the code that is in the iOS and Android folder with the projects that you already have, and that's basically it. So I did
Interesting.
it
Yeah.
via Git sub modules. I just created a React Native application, and then I removed the whole code from iOS and Android folders, and instead I attached my Wikipedia app forks to point to the correct repositories.
Okay, yeah. I was looking at one code here in the documentation, and it looks quite. I mean, it makes sense. They're creating a code to like a JS code location using localhost index bundle, and then they're creating an RCT root view. They're passing in the bundle URL, passing in some properties or data, and then launching this inside a new UI view controller. And I assume for Android, it's probably the same mechanism. So when I then click on that button, it would launch this new view and it would render the React Native app in there, I guess.
Yes.
Um, can I, or also do I have to run the bundler for React Native at the same time so the app is actually running? And do I have live reload in that app then, like I would have in a
Yes.
regular app?
Yes. The hot reload works really well, actually, especially if the app is simple. Then you can. I'm actually going to prepare a post with a small sample how hot reload works on that Wikipedia app I've mentioned. So yeah, I just wanted to test how it works. It works just fine. You can use the debug build, and you can get Metro, or you can use the release build and have everything bundled already and working a bit faster, let's say.
So if I look at this integration, I don't know. I mean, this is a super simple integration. If I assume I have a blank Swift application created and then I put in a React Native app and I just want to run it, it probably won't take me 3 hours. This feels more like in like 45 minutes, I should be able to see my React Native app in the Swift app.
Yeah, I think that in that case, I would recommend running a completely new React Native app. So you don't really need Brownfield integration for it.
I just want to be prepared for all cases. Like maybe the company wants Go Native and maybe React
Yeah,
Native.
yeah. So yeah, in that case, if there is a simple template, I wouldn't say that it would take more than 45 minutes. However, I'm not 100% sure if the tutorial on the React Native website is really up to date and it would work for 100%. I would have to test that, but I have some doubts about it. So yeah, maybe after a couple of visits on Stack Overflow, uh, you would be able to run it.
So I'm a big fan of Cursor and all the AI composer and generation right now. I wonder if I had my native app and like all the other apps, and that would I would pass it in that as context and say, hey, make a brownfield integration of my React Native app. I wonder if Cursor would be able to like touch the right files in the native iOS project and do all the magic.
Well, I to be honest, I really doubt that because of the lack of because of all the changes that happened in the past, and that the integration has changed a bit. Also, so especially with the new architecture that is coming.
Right. I had some questions about that as well, and some more specific stuff. So you already said Expo Router is currently not working with brownfield apps.
According to the well, to be 100% honest, uh, I think I don't see a reason why it shouldn't really work. But maybe it was not really well tested. That's why on the documentation it's written that it doesn't support brownfield.
Okay.
So that's my assumption, but I haven't tried that yet.
But beyond that, so if I jump off in the Android or iOS app into like my new React Native app, I can just use 100% of the navigation like I set it up for that React Native app, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically,
And
the React Native app already integrated. You can use everything that is in the React Native world.
I mean, a great use case is, of course, if you like pass some information to that React Native view, it's like the checkout of your web shop or something that you build with React Native, and then it can handle all the rest. But is there a way like to communicate back and forth between your native iOS app and the React Native app in some way, or is this where it gets really challenging?
Well, it's not very difficult because you have a couple of ways to communicate. First of all, you have the initial props. It's already explained in the tutorial that you have open, and it's there is some snippet with app properties or initial properties. This is something that you can pass to React Native, and you can retrieve that from the props on the top level of your application. So that's it. One way of communicating. Another way are native Turbo Expo modules. So this is the way that we can communicate. We can treat it as just regular React Native application with just more native code in there. But we've used native modules and they worked just fine. So we didn't have any problems. We used native modules before the introduction of new architecture. So we're planning to migrate to probably turbo modules, but we haven't done that yet. Nevertheless, everything seems to be working. And there are also events that can be passed to communicate between React Native and native sites. So yeah, well, there are a couple of ways to communicate. In that case, when we want to send an event from the native app to React Native to cause some change,
Mm.
we can do that. So we can communicate in both ways.
That's pretty cool. I don't know the topic. You said it, it's like 2% of apps are doing this, and it's maybe like a
It
niche
was a
thing,
guess.
but a
It
wild
was a
guess.
guess.
But
I'm not saying that there is no data about it, I suppose, but
I don't know. I'm getting excited about some of these topics. Also, I just had the same today. Webhooks. I don't know. I really love webhooks when I can like make one application make work with something completely different. It's something in my brain that just goes, "Wow, this is so exciting."
if there is a use case, there, well, we of course let's just try it out.
So, you mentioned the new architecture a couple of times. Are there problems related to the new architecture in Brownfield apps, or are there upcoming problems or issues that people can expect?
I wanna say no, but I
But you
mean,
can't.
I think um, on Android it went smoother. Sounds like a paradox. On iOS, there were some problems, especially with newer versions of React Native. I mean, with newer versions, with because on previous versions we didn't have really good support for a new architecture. So maybe I should say that there are still some problems on iOS, and we've discovered one of them just a couple of days ago. And the problem was that the instance of React root view that is supposed to be that should be used to open React Native, it doesn't have access to so-called Surface Presenter, and because of that, we had a couple of crashes. We had to do some workarounds, and it's not explained in the tutorial. So, so yeah, it's like knowledge that you gain, but it's not explained anywhere. So, we're thinking about a set of blog posts about it to help people. Maybe some pull requests to improve the Brownfield integration in general. Maybe for the next app.js, we're going to prepare some workshops about it, but we're not sure about the topics yet. However, maybe something will be organized by us. But yeah, new architecture works just fine, but you need to know about a couple of hacks to make it work first.
Oh, I see. I see. I'm looking forward to that definitely. So, um, you work at Software Mention, but I still gotta mention it. When I look this up, there's also from CallStack a template, React Native Brownfield, a set of helpers to make your Brownfield integration smooth and easy. Um, have you tried this? Do you have anything to say about this? Is this helpful for people getting started with Brownfield?
Well, the thing is that at the time when I started working with Brownfield, this library wasn't really maintained. I
Yeah,
mean, the
it's
last comments were like back then, the last comments were from 2 years ago, something like that.
mm,
I've noticed that recently something has changed, and there were some new commits that appeared on the repo. So maybe that would be worth to have a go and see how it helps. However, I haven't had chance to do that yet.
I will put a link so people can check it out. I noticed a lot of comments from Oscar Kwasniewski.
Yes,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah. He's worked on the Vision OS, so he also probably needed something from there.
Yeah, he also just posted something about like native tab bar on iOS and Android that also looked super interesting. So it looks like he's doing a lot of cool things right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm planning
Uh,
to see how this package will work with some. Maybe I'm going to just try another app to for the integration and see how it goes. I'm just a bit worried that's because React Native changes. If you integrate a package like that, you cannot just jump straight to the newest version of React Native, probably you would have to wait for some adjustments. But yeah, probably in the future we won't have so many changes in the core of React Native, so maybe that wouldn't be a problem. But that's one of the things I that's one thing I see that may be problematic, because so we try to have the newest version of React Native up to date. And yeah, in that case, if we would have to wait, because well, of course, sometimes we have blockers because we have
Yeah.
Expo SDK. Sometimes we need to wait. So if we have another brick like that, that could make the upgrade of React Native a bit slower. But yeah, it's of course a small thing, I believe. At least if you can live with React Native 74, even though React Native 75 is available.
Yeah. Yeah, we would have to check. Yeah, I think it's using 74 right now. Yeah. At the Okay, I'm just gonna put a link in the show notes so people can check it out if they're interested. So we talked a lot about like challenges related to it, and for everyone, by the way, I recommend check out the app.js talk. It's available on YouTube. I will put a link in the show notes as well from Mariusz, where I picked up this topic. There you presented a lot of challenges that you also had because you used like a specific Git structure and like folder structure and dependencies and paths were not working. So I took a note here as like one of the last questions. Is brownfield integration a good idea? So, because there are really like a lot of problems related to it, and you know this, like the scientists were so occupied like checking if we can do it that they stopped thinking if you should do it. So, is brownfield a good idea, and why should companies do brownfield integration over just like starting greenfield and using the latest available stuff?
First of all, I believe that if you can already run React Native in your app, it can speed up your development immensely, because of course you don't have to anymore build separate apps for iOS and for Android. So the development will be way faster, especially if you don't have to rebuild the app all the time because you have hot reload, metro, and so on. So if you'd like to test it out and see how it goes, I think for a gradual migration, it's a very good idea, especially if you'd like to speed up your development process and you want to share the code between two applications. You don't have to duplicate the code, because that's what basically happens right now. You have to write separate code for iOS, separate code for Android, but here you can do it within a couple of hours, really. If you don't have already a React Native application that you want to integrate and you start from the scratch, well, it can take you a couple of hours, but still, after that, the compensation will be way bigger, I believe. And yeah, I've during my talk, I've mentioned about many problems that I had, but I'd like to emphasize one thing. These problems were caused mostly by the fact that I had to integrate already a very big React Native application. So I wasn't starting from the scratch. I had to adjust plenty of things in order to make it work. So that's why I'm so proud of that, because I managed to run with help of my colleagues. A really big application, and by a standalone app, it's like, I don't know, 200 megabytes, something like that. So there is plenty of code and everything works. So this experience tells me that the most important thing is to make the app run, and then it's getting way easier. Unless, of course, you have some strange package that you need to integrate that has some clashes with your um, native dependencies. But I would say it doesn't happen too often, because for the past, I don't know, 3 4 months, even though we integrate with the React Native application every day, and we create a new build every single day with the newest code that is on the main branch. We didn't encounter any crashes, At least there weren't many. I don't remember any at this moment, at least. So it's now it goes really smoothly. When it's done, it's just like a React Native app. You just have to get used to the fact that yeah, there is more native code, and you have to be aware of that. But apart from this problem or issue, I don't want to call it a problem. Um, it goes really well and speeds up the development a lot.
That's a great tip to make it run. And I think yeah, that might be we can name the app. So you've been working on the Expensify app, right? That was the transition. But if I have my native application and then I bring in a completely fresh React Native app that has pretty much no dependencies or just a couple, and then I make it work, and when I then add new dependencies and features and it breaks, it's probably way easier to pinpoint this because I know, oh, I added this SDK, so now I need to probably fix something. But in your case, you had like 50 of these things stacked in the beginning and you like go through them one by one to finally make it work, right?
Yeah, but the first thing I've done anyway, I just took the simplest template of React Native to see if it can be run anyway. So that was my first step, and I wanted to prove that yes, in your native app we can run React Native. Next step is to integrate the app that we already have. So yeah, the problem was that I had already plenty of dependencies that needed to be handled, let's say.
Yeah.
Also, the pod file was already pretty big because there were some custom scripts that were added, some other integration, some packages also require adding some things into build Gradle or pod file. So you have to find good place for it. Another problem that we had to solve was that we didn't want to just build the Brownfield application. We wanted to let React Native to be built as a standalone application. So we had to adjust the code in such a way that we can build the so-called hybrid, we call it a hybrid app, and a standalone application that has only the React Native code. So that was also the thing that we had to handle. So we couldn't just swap things however we wanted. We just had to keep that in mind. But yeah, basically, we right now have two applications from the same React Native code.
Yeah, I wanted to ask how all of this played out for the Expensify app because I think in the end you showed like the Expensify app and you clicked a button and then it switched into like the React Native part. What is the current Expensify app on the App Store and like what is the general plan? I mean, if you can share something about how
Well,
they want to.
I'm not sure what can I can share. I can say that yeah, right now we are polishing
Mhm.
the Brownfield application so to be 100% sure that it works just fine for the users. So I think that's what I can share, but nothing more. I mean, I can say that it's coming.
I'm looking forward to that definitely. So I have one last question that I stumbled upon while we were talking. So if I look at the React Native docs, as I mentioned, there's like the first string here, a let JS code location, and then it's pointing to localhost something to like to my React Native app. I in the past did a tutorial where I used module federation to build like a I think called super app with like different micro front ends, and you can like point them with module federation to different URLs, and eventually you could also host them somewhere. Would it be possible to integrate like multiple React Native apps that run somewhere into one native iOS app to have like a like this
Yeah,
super app?
yeah, that would be possible. That would be possible because every React Native application has to call something like app registry register component, I think, and then you pass the name of the app. Usually, if you work on a greenfield application, you just accept that the code is there, and that's fine. It's the entry point for the application. It just matches the React root view with the JS React Native application. So if the name matches, we run the code that is there. But it doesn't mean that you can have only one React Native application. You can add multiple views. You can have separate flows, for example, screens. I haven't tested that out, but well,
I mean, the concept of micro front ends was super popular a couple of years ago. I don't know how popular it is still among companies, but
I haven't worked on such a thing before. So, but yeah, that would be a cool challenge. But I think that would be doable, and if everything is integrated correctly, I don't see a reason why it shouldn't work.
I mean, for big companies, that would be quite cool. Like the one team is working on the checkout, the other team is on the profile page, and like all of them are separate micro front ends that work together in one application. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I believe
Yeah.
that React Native, the brownfield of React Native, has a lot of unknown opportunities still out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, this was so inspiring. I wanted to do a tutorial on it. I just can't upload a 3 hour tutorial on Brownfield. I have to make that work faster.
Yeah, but yeah, but to be honest, um, while working on the Wikipedia app, the biggest problem I had was to run the standalone native application locally. So that was my biggest problem because I had to use an older Xcode version. They recommended a newer one. Probably there were some clashes there. So before I solved that, I lost like 1.5 hours. So out of those 3 hours, 1.5 was just to run the iOS application. So yeah, it's doable, but you need to know what you're doing.
Another hour was probably spent updating Xcode and to the latest version, or
No,
update
I didn't
Mac
want to
OS,
do
and then
that.
you have to update Xcode. And
I was too scared. Experience tells me that with React Native, you have to be very careful with upgrades. So yeah,
it's
I
horrible.
decided
It's
to stick to the previous version.
horrible. In your presentation, you had one, I think it was almost the last slide, with a couple of questions. Can it be done? Can we include Expo SDK? Will Metro work? And I think you answered all of them with yes. There was just one more thing. While we talked about this concept of like the micro front ends, I was thinking number 4, will deep links work correctly? Let's probably not talk about the micro front ends, but in general, deep links. And I know I said this is the last question, but this is now the last question. How can deep links work? Like, how is React Native then registering the URLs? So, like, how?
Yeah, it's there is a lot of native code we, in general involved because on Android you have to modify the Android manifest and provide the links that you want to support, and you have to attach it to a specific activity, and then you have to handle it. Actually, uh, you may if you run React Native as a separate activity, you should be able just to provide uh, paths, specific paths to the activity that you run React Native, and then well, it should help you to catch the path that you can later pass to the React Native application. Of course, it won't work out of the box. You would have to play with the code a bit. You would have to understand how activities work, intents. But the core is the Android manifest. So that's where the deep links are uh, declared, let's say. For iOS, it's a bit more complicated, I believe, because Apple has some security measures, and so well, you need to configure a specific file called Apple App also Association, something like that,
Hmm.
and in order to use so-called universal links. So I believe that it works in such a way that when you click a link, then the operation system checks if that specific domain has this specific file, and checks which application it can open. Then it opens the application with the specific URL. But yeah, it's a bit more complicated. However, that's how you do it. It's uh, uh, in general. So not so much JS code, mostly plugging in some things, adjusting some native code, and then when you finally have the URL, you can pass it to React Native and do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, the 90% of setting up the native stuff are horrible. Whenever I do a tutorial for push, it's like, please just let it work, because if it's not working, you have no idea where you made the mistake. Like,
Yeah,
probably there's a
also
typo in your associated files, or you uploaded it to the wrong directory, or
yeah,
universal links are horrible.
push notification is something I've been working quite a lot, and the biggest problem is to test it. So if you
Yeah.
are able to test it, it's already fine, because of course you also have the links that are in the push notification. Then you have to pass it somehow. Of course, React Native has its own mechanisms to handle it. There is, for example, a linking get in share URL that can be used, but as far as I noticed, in the Brownfield apps, it didn't work so well. So if you're a Greenfield user using Expo, you're a lucky person.
Yeah.
So, so you just don't have to worry about that so much. You can test it pretty easily, and then you can integrate it smoothly.
Yeah, I agree. Greenfield Expo push is like 20 minutes maybe, and
Yeah,
it usually works really fast. But
amazing
anything
tool.
beyond that, yeah. All right, Mariusz, that was great. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain Brownfield and everything related to it. Again, for everyone, check out the app.js talk if you're interested in a bit more in some actually specific problems of path and modules. Where can find people more about you? Any place you want to point people to?
First of all, well, you can visit my GitHub, and then there should be some link to X platform, because actually I'm going to start posting something about the Brownfield, because I see that there is some needs in that area. So I'm going to start working on my X profile. So that's the first thing. I can tell you how it's called. However, if you're not a Polish speaker, it may be difficult to find. It's Staszek SCP.
But
If
you can easily find Mariusz if you search for Mariusz Stanisz. That's how I
yes,
did it.
yes, you can also put my the link to my GitHub under the video, if that's possible. So
Absolutely.
that would be the easiest way to find me.
That's great. I will definitely do this. I'm also kind of sad that there are, I think it's like 0 posts. You haven't posted anything on X yet, right?
Yeah. That's why I decided to change that.
So when this episode goes live, 27 followers, we can increase that. Everyone go follow, and then we're gonna expect some epic content over there, especially about Brownfield integration. So thank you again for taking the time. We can definitely talk again about this in the future if this becomes easier or changes, and there are big updates to Brownfield, because I think it's a super interesting topic. And as you said, it's super powerful for companies. So let's see what happens in React Native land, and we will catch up again in the future. So
Yeah.
goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for joining today's episode. My goal is to share interesting stories and insights into the world of React Native development. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And on Spotify and Apple, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Because podcasts, and especially niche podcasts like this, are hard to find, subscribing and leaving a review does help me a lot. On top of that, check out my React Native courses on galaxies.dev that cover a variety of topics from getting started to building and publishing your mobile app. Finally, you can share today's episode with a friend or colleague who would enjoy the topic of the show. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, find me on X or leave a comment on YouTube. And last but not least, thank you for listening and happy coding, Simon.